Today I'm going to be talking about this book, which is my translation of Georg Trakl, and it's called Autumnal Elegies. It's a book that I spent about 30 years on, and it was actually turned down for publication by Unbound, who are a crowdfunding publisher. The reason they gave for rejecting it was that they felt that I wouldn't be able to raise the finance, which is code for you're working class. You don't have enough rich friends. So as a result of that, I decided to self-publish. Now, I want to talk about the methodology that I've used in my translations. And at the end of this piece, I'm going to recite one of those translations of a poem called Winter Dusk. So as I say, I want to talk about the methodology first of all. As far as I was concerned, I wanted to be as faithful to Trakl as possible. And if you split Trakl's poetry into its two main phases, you can see that there's quite a difference between them. The earliest period has poetry which is overwhelmingly metrical and it's overwhelmingly rhymed. About 90% of it is. Whereas the second phase is the exact mirror opposite of that. So the majority, 90% of the poetry is in free verse, and there's a very few poems which are actually rhymed, probably only 10%. So if you're going to translate one of the earlier poems, you need to bear in mind that some of your readers won't be familiar with the original German. And that being the case, it's really your duty to translate one of the earlier poems into metrical verse that's rhymed. Because if you translate it as free verse, and in fact if you translate all Trakl's poetry into free verse, you're giving the reader a false picture of Trakl's poetic development. So, when it comes to Winter Dusk, what I want to do first of all is just quote the opening line, because that will give you an idea of the meter that we're talking about here. The opening line goes as follows: Schwarzer Himmel von Metall. Schwarzer Himmel von Metall. As you can see, that's got 7 syllables in it. And it's an example of what's known as trochaic meter. What that means is the metrical foot begins with a strong stress followed by a weak stress. So schwarzer, okay, strong, weak. And it's the exact opposite of the iambic foot that Shakespeare uses, which is weak, strong. So when it comes to translating that line into English, arguably the most literal translation would be black sky of metal. The only word that could be a problem there is the German word Himmel, which can also mean heaven as well as sky. But most translators of Trakl, myself included, opt for the word sky here, but obviously bear in mind the other religious meaning, because there are some religious symbols towards the end of the poem. So if you translate that line into English, it becomes black sky of metal. Unfortunately, that's only 5 syllables, so we're 2 syllables short, and there's 2 other problems to note. First of all, the opening foot is what's known as a spondee. 2 strong stresses, one after the other. Black sky. You can't say those 2 words without stressing both of them equally. And the other problem you've got is that word metal. In German, the stress comes on the second syllable. It's Metall, but not in English. So if you're going to translate that line of Trakl's poem into English, the worst possible translation would be Black Sky of Metal. We've already established that just doesn't work. As you can imagine, that's not how I translate the line, and I'm going to now read my translation, which throughout is metrically regular and where I do attempt to rhyme as often as I can and use other techniques where I can't. So, without further ado, this is my translation of Winter Dämmerung, which I translate as Winter Dusk. Sky of black metallic ore. At nightfall crimson tempest blows. Crosswise hunger-maddened crows over dreary parkland soar. A ray congeals within the clouds, and, by Satan's curses goaded, they spiral 7 times in total before descending on the ground. In putrescence, sweet and stale, their beaks make silent lacerations. Houses loom from mute locations. In the theatre, light prevails. Churches, bridges, hospital, in twilight gruesomely appear. Canvas sails with bloody smears belly out on the canal. So there we have it, Winter Dusk, in my collection Autumnal Elegies. And the book is available in paperback and also in ebook form on Amazon.